My testimony, my story begins and ends with God. This is not a testimony to anything that I have done, but a testimony to God's grace in my life. I grew up in a normal, middle-class, regular run-of-the-mill family. I believe I was in third grade and my parents divorced. Started experiencing a lot of nightmares in the middle of the night. And every night I would run in and sleep with my mother for comfort. One morning I woke up and she had slept through the alarm and she was blue. She had had a heart attack in her sleep. And really long story short, she survived the heart attacks, but had a significant amount of brain injury as a result of the heart attacks. Somewhere right along that, I started experimenting with different things. Me and some friends, we camped out in my backyard and drank a flask of brandy. Woke up the next morning, everybody had hangovers. Those friends went home and I called up a new set of friends and they came over and we finished off the brandy that night. And that became basically my MO for the rest of my teenage and 20s. I would burn through one set of friends using as much and as fast as I could. I started experimenting with drugs, pot specifically, drinking a lot more, but all the while holding my life together, I guess, hiding it from my family and friends. By the time I got into high school, my alcohol and drug use continued to increase. I found my acceptance with the people that were using and using regularly. By the end of high school, I was using basically every day, and especially on the weekends. My friends and I, we would come downtown and skate and get chased around by the police. We would skate the art museum and all these different places, and a lot of times we would find ourselves in these parking garages. So there's one specific parking garage that overlooks the big cemetery, and I spent many a day up there smoking weed, drinking. I guess what I thought about God was that he didn't really care. He was just pushing us around and telling us what to do. My grades slipped dramatically my junior and senior year of high school, and eventually I dropped out of all sporting activities and failed out of high school. Things with my parents came to a boiling point. My father and I got into it, and I left home. The whole time, I don't remember thinking much about God or thinking about the things of God, but my drug use kept on escalating, and I went from easier, cheaper drugs to harder and more dangerous drugs. My brothers attempted to talk me into going to rehab at this point, and the only one that I could remember by name was the Greenville Rescue Mission. So I found myself sitting in the front of the rescue mission and in the office of Curtis Pitts, the then director of the Overcomers program. He informed me that I was a good candidate for the Overcomers, but that I was too messed up to get into the Overcomers. So he sends me to detox for a week. I spent a week in detox, came back to the Overcomers program, and started my journey with Miracle Hill. I would say that I was agnostic at the time. I believed in a God. I had no idea who God was. I guess I believed God was like a little kid with a magnifying glass burning ants, and I just happened to be the ant that he seemed to like to burn a lot. Some months later, a counselor gave me a book, More Than a Carpenter, and I got to the section where he talks about whether Christ was a liar, a lunatic, or a Lord. And then the disciples who would have known, if anybody knew who God was, it was them. If they knew whether or not Christ was a liar, a lunatic, or a Lord, it was them. And they all ultimately were martyred for their belief. I got a buddy of mine, and I walked downstairs to the chapel, and I gave my life to the Lord. So over the next months, I continued to try to work on my life, fix my issues. I went all the way through the program, graduated the program. I stayed at the rescue mission, I worked, I ran the kitchen, and I agreed to do about 90% of what was asked of me. I eventually relapsed. My problem for many years had been drugs, but I thought that I could just handle some drinking. It took about a year for the alcohol to take me to a deeper, darker place than the drugs ever took me, surprisingly. It wasn't until I didn't have anybody else to call upon that I looked to God. It wasn't until I had burned all the bridges and received the full dose of tough love that I deserved that I was able to get past myself and reach out for a loving Savior. I made a phone call, and as Miracle Hill always does, if you cannot find a friend in the world, you can find one here. Went back into the Overcomers program, which was probably twice as difficult the second time as it was the first time, because I really didn't have any excuses, and I agreed to do 100% or more of what was asked of me. I was made aware of a job opportunity with Miracle Hill working at the Relief Ministry, which is our food warehouse. I did not want to take the job. I thought it was beneath me. I did against what my flesh wanted to do, and I took the job. I got to work with a gentleman by the name of Tom Callahan. This guy had an understanding of grace that I had no clue about. I think that I looked at my relationship with God very religiously, very rule-based. Where I saw things as black and white, he saw things in just a solid, graceful gray, and had a love for the Lord that I don't know that I had experienced firsthand like that before. Eventually, Curtis came back to me and offered me a job coming back and working with the Overcomers program. So I came over to the Overcomers program as the level 4 counselor. I eventually went from being the level 4 counselor to the level 1 counselor. Through that, I get to see myself every day. I walk around the Overcomers Center and I see myself in each man that I come in contact with. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that God made me an addict, but God has enabled me to use the destructive things in my life for really good things for His glory. You're never going to know what He can do for you, what your life can become, unless you let go. And if you will give Him the opportunity, He will show you how real He is. It is not Miracle Hill that caused that, but God used Miracle Hill to accomplish it. And I'll be forever grateful for that.